Welcome to our final day in our walk through Holy Week, using Borg and Crossan's book, The Last Week. We are told in Greek Christianity today is called the Holy and Great Friday. In German it is Sorrowful Friday, and our term Good Friday may have come from the German Gutes Freitag, God's Friday. But here we are, Friday, the most important day of the Christian year. The story of this day is told in the Gospels. It is a day that is central to our faith. Borg and Crossan focus on Mark's retelling of this story. But if we are to hear how Mark tells the story, we need to filter out other versions, and maybe even set aside some of our familiar Christian theology. Let us be open and willing to come to Holy Friday and perhaps a different perspective to hear what the Spirit might be saying to us. Mark tells the story in precisely indicated 3-hour intervals. From dawn, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., from 9 a.m. to noon, from noon to 3 p.m., from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., and from 6 p.m. to the burial of Jesus. Let us begin with early dawn. It is told to us in Mark 15, verses 1 to 21. It is during this section that Jesus is handed over to Pilate for questioning. Jesus responds to Pilate's question, "Are you the king of the Jews?" with a simple answer of, "You say so." But then he refuses to say anything else. An act of both great courage and great contempt that he knew wouldn't go unpunished. Jesus is then handed over to a specially chosen and primed crowd. They're not the same as those that have been waving branches on Palm Sunday. This crowd shouts for Barabbas to be released and for Jesus to be crucified. Jesus is then flogged and handed over to be crucified. He is mocked, taunted, has a crown of thorns put on his head, and he's tied up and led away. Again and again they struck him on the head, and with a staff and spat on him. Falling on their knees, they paid homage to him. And when they had mocked him, they took off the purple robe and they put on his own clothes. And then they led him out to crucify him.
Were you there when they led him out to die? Were you there when they led him out to die? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they led him out to die?
In the second section, 9 a.m. to noon, Mark tells us in verses 21 to 32 that Jesus was taken to Golgotha. His clothes were divided by lots. And he was crucified between two rebels. Crucifixion is a very public form of death, and it is calculated to be a social deterrent to others who may be rebel insurgents by trying to subvert Roman law. Jesus is one of those. Again and again, Jesus deliberately challenged the Roman and religious authorities. He deliberately showed them a way of justice, and he knew the price he would pay. As Jesus hung from the cross, he is mocked and insulted. We're told the chief priests and the teachers of the law mocked him among themselves. He saved others, they said, but he can't save himself. Let this Messiah, this King of Israel, come down from the cross that we may see and believe. Those crucified with him also reaped insults on him.
Were you there when they nailed him to a cross? Were you there when they nailed him to a cross? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they nailed him to a cross?
Noon to 3 p.m. is the third section of time. Mark tells us the whole story of this period of pain and agony in just one single verse. He writes, "At noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon." Darkness. What is that? Was it a literal eclipse of the sun, as some have suggested? Unlikely. Or does Mark use the term darkness as religious symbolism? Culturally, darkness has been used to confer suffering and mourning. Today, darkness is often used to talk about fear. We say, those are dark times. Perhaps some might describe the days that we are currently in as dark times.
Were you there when the sun refused to shine? Were you there when the sun refused to shine? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when the sun refused to shine?
Amidst its darkness, the light of Christ, of love and peace and justice, still shines though. The next section is 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. In Mark's account, it tells us from verses 33 to 40 that Jesus cried out the words of deliverance from Psalm 22. My God, why have you forsaken me?" We read of the offer of a sponge filled with wine vinegar. And Mark tells us that with a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. Mark also tells us that Jesus died. The curtain of the temple was torn in two. Did the temple literally crumble? Unlikely. It is more likely that Mark is again using symbolic language to tell us that the wall, the veil that concealed the inner part of the temple has been removed. So now everyone has access to the Most Holy. To say that the curtain was torn means that through Jesus' death, we could be in the presence of God. We, here today, here now, have access to the presence of God because of Jesus' sacrifice. Jesus made it possible for us to have a relationship with God.
Were you there when Jesus showed the way? Were you there when Jesus showed the way? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when Jesus showed the way?
It has been a long day. Now, as evening approaches around 6 p.m., sunset will soon mark the beginning of Sabbath. Anxious that Jesus' body is buried before Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea is granted Jesus' body by Pilate. He wraps it in linen cloth, and he places it in a tomb. A stone is rolled in front of the entrance. It is over. The events of Friday are finished. Jesus is now dead and buried.
Were you there when they laid him in a tomb? Were you there when they laid him in a tomb? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they laid him in a tomb?
But we know that is not the end. We know that the stage has now been set for Easter Sunday. The women in the garden must wait. The disciples must wait. We must wait. We also know that the hope of the resurrection is just around the corner. The hope that we can experience here, today, yesterday, tomorrow, and ever. Amen.